Hey everyone, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for helping me reach 100 subscribers. I honestly couldn't have done this without your love, support, and constant encouragement. Every like, comment, and subscribe means a lot to me. Now let's keep this journey going. Our next target is 200 subscribers, and I know we can do it together. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's grow as a family. Thank you once again. Zoro is dead, and the Straw Hats are shattered. When Robin uncovers an ancient legend promising resurrection on a forgotten myth island, hope returns, but at a terrible cost. The spell demands proof of love, something no one believes Zoro ever felt. With only 48 hours before the legend becomes useless, Luffy forces his crew back to sea, racing against time, doubt, and destiny itself. As the truth behind Zoro's heart slowly surfaces, the crew must face one question. Can devotion strong enough to defy death truly exist? Disclaimer. This story do not belong to me. The author is The Stuff of Legends by 1004-Angel. Respect to author.
Chapter 1. Zoro's Lament. Sometimes, I forgot why I joined his crew. I wondered why I put up with his stupidity and incompetence. He disturbed me every day, poking at my side and egging me on to play a childish game of tag. I would crack open one eye and tell him straight up no, and he would slouch away, muttering about my being a party pooper. I would close my eye and fall asleep again, only to be awoken by being stepped on by a stupid cook. I hated the simple way he took things, the way he called everything a mystery. And his stupid rubber powers got in the way too, especially during meals. When dealing with a bottomless pit, you learn to guard your food with every amount of strength you had. I was the first mate of the Straw Hat Pirates. Not by choice, of course. He practically forced me to join, and at first I was confident. This scrawny kid I could easily defeat in a fight anytime I wanted. And one wrong step to lead me off from my dream, and his guts would be across my boots. The greatest swordsman in the world. My dream. Not many pirates still carried that, a dream. Most sail on for the hell of it, going wherever the wind takes them and not giving a damn where they end up. They have nothing driving them on, no goal for them to accomplish. At times in my early life, I thought I was the only one with the ambition. And then I met him. His confident smile spoke to me. To be the king of the pirates, is what he said. And for some reason, I believed him. I may not even know his name, but the way he talked, that cheeky grin on his face and an enthusiastic thumbs up. I liked him. He had spunk, but I wouldn't go with him. I had my own goals, my own dreams to fulfill. And yet, I still went with him. And now, if I could, I would travel back in time and slap myself. Don't do it. Don't join up with this guy. Hell awaits you, and a stupid cook who won't shut the hell up about women. Save yourself and cherish your sanity while you still can. But a me from the future would stop me, holding me back. He would tell me about the things I never would have accomplished had I not met him. For one, I would be dead, executed by that bastard Marine. I never would have met Mihawk, and realized I still wasn't good enough. I had gotten cocky. I already believed myself to be the best, and I thought the more swords, the more powerful one could be. That fight taught me I still had a hell of a lot to learn, that was for sure. And I had that scar to remind me. It pulsed every now and then, and I would immediately train, like it would egg me on, to not let myself get weak. No, had I not met that rubber idiot, challenging an assassin from the North Blue would have been impossible. The accomplishment of slicing steel would have been out of my reach for many a year, possibly until I was even 30 years old, or more. That battle was a pain in the ass, but I was drawn to the breath of all things, feeling the presence of the life around me. Had I not met him, battling a god in the sky would have been a distant dream. Had I not met him, defeating a giant giraffe man would not have made the to-do list. Had I not met him, I would be as weak as ever, and possibly never be as strong as I am now. Without knowing, I got stronger and stronger with every island we passed. It was subtle, but with every enemy defeated, my experience grew, and my katana thrived within my hands. Never would I have gained this much power only as a simple bounty hunter. TCH. Had I not met him, I wouldn't be about to do this right now. The giant ball of pain floated only a foot away, shimmering red with the rising sun. My breath came in deep gasps, and I could feel the blood staining my clothing, running down my arms and trickling down my back. My body was weak, unable to handle the constant fight after fight, and then surviving the giant bomb that blasted the entire ship Thriller bark to Kingdom Come. And not only that, battling the bear man one-on-one was taking its toll. I was definitely at my physical limit. That one sample he had given me. It was like fire in my veins. All my organs ripped themselves apart and were sewn together again, the skin peeled from my bones and nails driven into my skull. My eyes turned to goo inside my head, and ears pounded with blood. A scream ripped itself from my throat, a sound I had no idea I could make. It was over in an instant, and I fell to the ground, desperately heaving air into my lungs. It was a glorious feeling, sweet oxygen filling my body. Despite this, I could barely move, and I was being pricked all over with 1,000 needles. Being electrocuted by that witch's staff was a mosquito bite compared to this, and that for sure was saying something. But now I stood alone. I had to do this. It was for him, all for him. I had come to realize along our journey that our dreams all began to intersect with one another. I couldn't accomplish my dream if he didn't accomplish his. No one could. If he died, all our respective dreams would be crushed, annihilated, completely razed into oblivion. So now here I was thinking about everyone else. Even the shitty cook. If I sacrificed myself, allowing the captain to live on, everyone else could see their dreams come true. One by one, that coward would become the man he always wanted. That witch would draw her stupid map. That shitty dartboard would find his all blue. That bipolar reindeer would find his cure for all diseases. That woman would find her Rio poneglyph. That perverted robot would sail to the ends of the earth on his ship. That obnoxious skeleton would be reunited with his pet whale. That stupid rubber man would become the king. And me, I lunged for the giant paw of pain, throwing my arms inside. Immediately, the pain raced through my body, turning it to what felt like molten lava. The sample had been multiplied 400,000 times, possibly even more. I was surprised I could even focus on anything right now as my body thrashed around, clawing at myself as if that would ease the pain. As for me, well, I wouldn't become the greatest swordsman in the world. I was going to die, right here. And it was right at that moment when I realized why I joined him. I joined him because I smelled adventure. He gave me opportunities to do what no man has done before, go where no man has gone, and see what no man has seen. He showed me what it means to have true nakama, to truly care about someone, and to love them so much you would risk your life for theirs. Maybe I had learned something from a rubber-brained moron. But as my world grew black, and my thoughts hazy, the one thing that remained in my head was a simple phrase, one I had declared defiantly only a while ago. I smiled through the pain that still racked my body, closing my eyes and shouting out for the entire world to hear. Luffy is the man, WHO will be the pirate king. Chapter 2, Ode of True Bonds. If I can't even protect my captain's dream, then whatever ambition I have is nothing but talk. Roronoa Zoro. I was floating in a dark world. No light, no warmth, cold as nothing, is fear. The fear that weighs in your consciousness and shrouds all other thought until your blood freezes in your veins and you're too numb to feel anything else. Fear, pressing in on me from all sides, suffocating me. I cried out, but there was no one there. I was alone. Loneliness, just about as terrifying as cold, as fear. No one to cry to, no one to comfort you. No one to take out your frustrations on, and they never seem to learn and keep coming back. No, there was no one. Just me. A green orb sudden appeared an arm's length away. Or it could have been miles, it was impossible to tell in this massive vacuum of nothingness. It didn't do anything, just wishing and glowing in place, tendrils of green smoke rising around it like steam from a coffee pot. I reached out to touch it, the steam tickled my bare skin, wrapping around my fingers. I tried to touch the source, but my hand passed right through, intangible. The orb suddenly began to transform. It elongated, 4 separate pieces protruding from the sides. Its color faded to a tan shade. It sprouted more lumps, slowly taking the form of legs, feet, arms, hands, fingers, and a head. The steam gathered at the peak of the head, condensing into hair. It stopped morphing, and I stared at the sudden replica of myself that had appeared. I knew my hair anywhere, and my haramaki, my earrings. Anyone could see that this was me. But where were my prized katana? It was a 1 in a million chance to see me without them. My eyes were closed, hard, shaded. My arms were crossed, fingers gripping the opposite bicep tightly. Slowly my clothes began to rip, shredding into tiny pieces that floated around aimlessly. Wide gashes sprouted on my skin, and blood poured from the open wounds, staining my body and clothes. I didn't understand. What was happening? Why did I look like I'd just had a run-in with death? This couldn't be happening. I waved my limbs wildly, trying to propel myself forward. I wouldn't believe it until I could feel its physical presence for myself. There was no way in hell I'd let myself get like that. My fingertips brushed my toned bicep, and a white light suddenly rushed at me, and I had the sensation of falling.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
My stomach jumped into my throat, and a sharp wind bit into my back. A yell was ripped from my throat, and I soon stopped trying. No one would hear me, anyway. This continued for what seemed like an hour before I finally collided with something hard, lying spread-eagled on my back. Rubbing the back of my head, I sat up and saw myself in a small rocky clearing. The stones were smeared in a red liquid, coating the ground. A few trees were uprooted, lying across the hard earth. Other trees stood around, but had taken a severe beating. I was examining the liquid when a branch snapped, and I lurched to my feet, whipping around to prepare to fight. My body stood a few feet away, the same vision created by that green orb. I had been disembodied for some reason. Maybe I was having one of those weird dreams, where people are sleeping and sit up, only to look behind them and see their body. I had almost convinced myself of this when my brain finally clicked, and my memory returned. The searing pain, Luffy, thriller bark, Shibukai. I stumbled back a step, my eyes widening. Oh shit. I patted myself down, picking at the deep green yukata I was clothed in. My skin emitted a greenish tint, and if I looked closely enough, I could see my feet through my hand. I'm a ghost, I realized with dread. I died. Oi, Marimo. A voice yelled. I looked up to see a familiar asshole appear from behind a boulder. If possible, the blonde cook looked even worse than however long ago I'd knocked him out. How much time had passed? Days, hours. There he is, Sanji panted, veering slightly and running into the rocky clearing. Oi, Marimo. What happened here? What does it look like? I growled. Bloody body, bloody rocks, do the math, shithead. Aren't you going to answer me? Sanji continued. What the hell? I yelled, waving my arms. Can't you hear me? Apparently, he couldn't. Damn, being a ghost is a pain in the ass. I could only watch as Sanji roughly grabbed my body's shoulder. It lost its firm stance. Its arms unfolded and swung wildly as it collapsed, lying there lifelessly in a rising cloud of dust. Careful with that, I yelled, but of course, no one was there to listen. Sanji didn't seem to quite comprehend exactly what had happened. Oh oi, shithead. No answer. Hey, Marimo. Silence. Zoro. I jumped. Since when had Sanji called me by name? The last time I had heard it felt like just back at the Barati where we first met. Ridiculous. It was always, Marimo, or, shithead. He must really be shaken to the core. Sanji didn't say anything for a while, only staring at my body's motionless form. He nudged its leg with his boot, and I couldn't help but smirk. By now the idiot had to realize my body would never react. As if on cue, realization dawned on him, and he stumbled back a few steps, shaking his head. No, he murmured. Yeah, I said, watching as the cook heaved a huge sigh and stepped forward again, grabbing my body's limp arm. He pulled it up over the back of his neck, ignoring the smear of blood, and wrapped his arm around its abdomen. With shaky steps, he began walking in the direction of the giant castle, and I followed. My body's feet dragged in the dirt, and Sanji stumbled whenever they caught on a loose stone. I reached out to help, but my arm passed straight through them. The first time I tried this, my arm was wrist deep into Sanji's arm, and a tugging sensation pulled at my arm, and I yanked it back before it could do anything. I instinctively stepped around boulders and fallen logs, but after accidentally falling through a bush and having it pass right through me, I stopped dodging. Intangible. Before long, I could see various people standing from the wreckage of the bomb, dusting themselves off and shouting out with joy at their survival. They rubbed their heads and followed Sanji's slow pace, my limp body slung over his shoulder. A happy yell suddenly met my ears, and I immediately recognized the voice. I sighed in relief, glad the bear man had held up his end of the agreement. I ran ahead of the cook, standing on top of a huge boulder. I was afraid I would fall right through, but it seems if I didn't want to turn intangible, then I wouldn't. Luffy was joyously leaping from foot to foot, clapping his hands above his head. Chopper scurried around, pleading with the captain to stop jumping and sit down for a proper examination. The rest of the crew stared at him in bewilderment. There was no way anyone could be moving as he did after being almost killed. Hey, check it out. Luffy yelled with a huge grin. My body feels great. What happened? Liar. There's no way. Usopp muttered. Oi, Luffy, calm down. You shouldn't be moving. He shouldn't even be conscious. Chopper countered, trying to hold a stethoscope to Luffy's chest, but the ecstatic rubberman kept leaping, and Chopper continuously missed. Did he take so much damage that it cancelled the pain and make him high? Robin wondered aloud. No way, that can't happen. Chopper explained. Nami looked over just in time to see Sanji appear, my body in tow. Her pupils shrank in horror, and she held a hand to her mouth. Oh my god, she whispered. Everyone, including the fat-lipped lady and her crew, stared in the direction Nami was staring. Luffy stopped jumping, the grin melting from his face. They stared in horror, watching as Sanji neared them. Whispers spread through the crowd, and I could only watch with sad eyes. Only Robin didn't seem to be staring at my body. She seemed to be looking right at me, but her eyes were squinted as if she couldn't quite see. Sanji, said Luffy slowly. Why is Zoro hanging on you like that? My heart stopped beating for a moment. Did Luffy really not realize the density of the situation? Could he not put two and two together? For one, I would never allow myself to be supported by the dumb arrow cook. But I could see the gears turning, and the slow hypothesis forming. Because, Sanji searched for an answer. I don't know. I just found him like this. Set him down, Chopper ordered, racing over in heavy point. Together, the two slowly lowered my body to a flat rock, where it just laid there limply, like a rag doll. The doctor immediately set his stethoscope to its bloody chest. He moved it around to a few more spots, and he let out a horrid wail, taking a step back and shrinking to brain point. Tears beaded his eyes, and he tried to hold them back. "Chopper, what's wrong?" Luffy cried. Frankie cocked his head, seeming to understand. "What's up, little reindeer gorilla?" "Ah," said the skeleton. "I thought he was a moose." Zoro is," the tiny doctor tried to choke out the words. Sanji finished it for him. "Zoro is dead." Silence descended upon the entire area like their voice boxes had malfunctioned. I bit my lip, but crossed my arms to relieve the tension. Watching my Nakama's faces suddenly contract into expressions of pure horror was unbearable. Nami started to cry, comforted by Robin. Sanji just looked downright pissed off, and Usopp just stood there. Frankie started playing his stupid guitar, and Brook just stared without seeing. Shit, skull joke. That stupid skeleton was rubbing off, and we hadn't even known him for a full 24 hours. Luffy, however, was perhaps the worst of all. He was a mix between upset, stunned, angry, and ignorant at the same time. He wouldn't accept it. He shook his head rapidly, holding his hands to his ears. No, he wouldn't accept it. I curved my lips into a sad smile. At least I was the only one. No, better me than Luffy. You know, Robin broke the silence, rubbing Nami's back as she cried into the older woman's shoulder. I read a book about death once. No offense, Nico Robin, said Frankie, strumming a depressing note. But this isn't the best time. No, it's not a super time at all to be recommending books. No, but listen, this was a special book. A special book. Chopper sniffed. Luffy just stared at my body, head lolled to the side with a permanent scowl. At least that had stayed there. I could tell he was listening, even if the others couldn't comprehend. Robin nodded. A very special book. It tells of a legend on Myth Island. Myth Island, said Sanji skeptically. It doesn't sound very trustworthy. Robin smiled sadly. Probably not. But a legend is better than nothing. What are you saying, Robin? Usopp queried. This legend tells of a resurrection ceremony, she explained. I don't remember it right now, we'll have to go back to the ship. Let us help, said fat-lipped Lola, stepping forward with two of her subordinates.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
We must honor the fallen hero who helped save us. Fallen hero. I could live with that. Wait, I was dead. Shit, another skull joke. Luffy nodded numbly, and 30 minutes later, my still bloody body had been laid on a makeshift stretcher, fashioned from two huge branches and a large piece of cloth ripped from the giant sail. Chopper and Sanji supported the branches, walking slowly away from the scene. The rest of the pirates followed suit, their heads bowed. Nami hugged my katana to her chest. The straw hats surrounded me, occasionally glancing hopefully down at my body as if I would suddenly sit up and yawn. No, that wouldn't happen this time. I followed near the back of the Straw Hat group, where Robin was trailing behind. She seemed lost in thought, her eyes staring unemotionally forward. Damn woman, couldn't she show just a little compassion? Not that I was enjoying having myself fawned over, but still, we were Nakama. She couldn't show just a sliver of remorse, could she? But despite this, I still detected a bit of a hunch in her shoulder, and her head hung a bit lower than usual, and I could tell she was upset. We arrived back at the ship. Sanji and Chopper took my body into the crow's nest, laying among my various exercise equipment, Chopper with my swords tucked carefully under his arm. I didn't follow. First off, because I didn't know if I could climb, and second because I wanted to hear what Robin had to say about this legend. We all sat silently in the grass, not meeting gazes. Nami didn't even seem to register the massive pile of golden treasure sitting on deck, which is how I knew exactly how dire the situation was. Luffy perhaps seemed the most distant of all. He moved away from the others, nibbling half-heartedly on a piece of cheese. I followed him as he moved into the kitchen, and laughed to myself as he instinctively opened the fridge for a hunk of meat. He held it as he sat at the table, just staring at it. That was how I knew how extremely this was hitting my captain. I had been his first crewmate, his first Nakama. We started the Straw Hat Pirates together, and now our journeys together were at an end. I would have cried myself had I not sworn never to show any such weaknesses again. I found it, called Robin from outside, and Luffy and I exited the kitchen to listen. The Straw Hats and other various Lola pirates had gathered in a circle around the archaeologist, and the first thing I thought of was how normal she looked with that worn book in her hands. It made the situation that much more, damn, no word for it. Tell us, Robin, Chopper sobbed. What does it say? Robin flipped through the pages, finally coming to a stop and reading aloud. If a man dies in the honor of another, bring that man to the highest temple on the highest mountain and lay his body in the river Chai. Should that man been in love with a woman in his life, said woman should revive him within the waters as the sun rises. Should this occur, the man whose life was lost shall be returned the world of the living. Silence. It took me a second to register it, but when I did, it just stunned me. Been in love? I asked myself. Love just dulls the blade. Sanji seemed to think the same. Despite his depressed, pissed-off expression, he snorted out a laugh. Marimo. In love. That's what it says, said Robin plainly, and I detected a flush on her cheeks, but I may have just imagined it. But it's only a legend, Nami pointed out. Besides, we don't even know where this myth island is. Coordinates are in the book, Robin explained. Whoever the author is must have known someone might want to resurrect a lost loved one. Yosh. Luffy suddenly seemed to regain a bit of his composure. Set sail for Myth Island. The Lola pirates cheered. You can do it, Mugiwara. They yelled triumphantly. However, Robin interrupted, and dead silence fell on the crowd. Shit. Skull joke. There's a catch. What's up, Nico Robin? Frankie asked. Yeah, stop ruining the mood. Usopp muttered. Such a ritual should be completed within 48 hours of the man's death. Again, silence. I could tell immediately what everyone else was thinking. How long had it been since I died? Hell, I didn't know. It could have been seconds before being found, or hours. No one knew how long it had been. But still, even now they were wasting time. Luffy realized this first. We sail, he yelled, jerking everyone into motion. We're going to get Zoro back. I watched the ensuing chaos. It was funny, really. Usopp had to climb to the rigging with Sanji to lower the sails, which was usually my job, and everyone instinctively lifted their legs higher as if to avoid my slumbering form. The Lola pirates tried to help out as much as they could, but only seemed to get in the way. Lola only had time to give Nami a weird paper before being quite literally booted from the deck by Frankie, along with the rest of her crew. Nami stuffed the paper in her pocket and set the coordinates for Myth Island. "Ah, Luffy-san," Brook asked as Luffy ran past him. Luffy jogged in place, staring up at the skeleton. I know this is sudden, but may I join your crew?" "Of course," said Luffy hurriedly. "You already were." With that being said, he sped off to continue whatever he had been doing. Brook just stood there, looking elated. "Yo-ho-ho. Thank you, Luffy-san. Have a good trip, Straw Hats." The Lola pirates yelled, waving their hands. "Bring back Zoro-san. Bring back the fallen hero. Do your best. Thank you for saving us." I stood at the railing, watching the other pirates fade as the Thriller Bark land ship faded to a speck behind us. With a hesitant grip, I placed a hand on the rail, and it did not turn intangible. Smiling with relief, I gripped the rail and watched the water, breathing in deeply. I could still smell the ocean, and it calmed me a bit. Someone walked up behind me. I take that back. Someone walked through me. It was a hot feeling, like I'd been submerged in a boiling tub of water. I felt the tugging again, only this time, it was in my whole body, and I didn't have any chance to resist before I was pulled, I don't know exactly where. But suddenly, I was looking out at the ocean, normally. I could see, but out of the corner of my eye, I could tell my skin wasn't glowing green anymore. My arms were normal. Well, not really. They were long and slender, with manicured nails. My chest felt a bit heavy, and I figured, with growing dread, I had been sucked into one of the girls. Wow, that sounds really perverted. Damn, I mean, like, I had kind of entered. No, possessed. Maybe. Overshadow. Yeah, I guess that could work. I had overshadowed someone, sharing their body and mind so I saw what they could see. So now I was in one of the girls. I couldn't tell which one, her mind was so alien and secretive. I couldn't penetrate it at all, and when I tried, I was only met by a strong force propelling me back. This had to be Robin. Nami wouldn't keep her mind so enclosed like this. But there was something off, I was a part of her, and I could tell how she was feeling. Distraught might be the right word, but calm at the same time. "Robin," Luffy's voice called, and my vision suddenly shifted from the ocean to the captain, who stood in the center of the deck along with the rest of the crew. My conclusion had been correct. As Robin began to walk forward, I stayed behind, suddenly finding myself watching the archaeologists retreating back. So I could only overshadow while the living subject was immobile. Interesting. Yes, Robin asked quietly, and I walked forward to join them. "We're going to, say a few words," Nami whispered. "You know, Zoro was our nakama, and now, well. By my estimate, it'll take a few hours to reach Myth Island from where we are now, if we throw in a coup de burst or two." "No cola," Frankie interrupted solemnly. "Those damn zombies must have taken it all." "Well, we'll push Sunny to her limit, then," Nami growled. "But we need to just occupy our time. And we have a lot of it, and we didn't get a chance to say anything in our rush." "I understand," Robin raised a hand, smiling softly. "Say no more. I wanna go first," Luffy yelled, raising his hand. The straw hats parted, making way for Luffy to stand at the base of the main mast, staring up at the crow's nest where my body lay. I was curious to see what each of my nakama would say. I followed Luffy up the rungs, hoping I wouldn't fall intangibly through them. I was a bit surprised that Luffy didn't rocket himself up there. I guess he was trying to be normal for once. Luffy pushed open the trap door, emerging into the spacious room I had occupied practically every night while on watch. My body lay in the center of the room, hands folded over my Wado Ikimonji, while Shisui and Kietsu lay on either side. Chopper had probably bandaged it up while the others had prepared to sail, because my body was scrubbed clean and fresh white strips covered me practically from head to toe. I had heard him say once that dead men don't bleed. I guess he hoped that by some miracle I was resurrected, I would immediately begin to bleed once again. Luffy situated himself on the floor, sitting cross-legged by my head. I sat opposite him on the other side, listening intently for him to begin. Chapter 3 Rendered helpless. That's your burden as captain. Don't falter. If you do, then who are we supposed to believe in? Roronoa Zoro. It was quiet, really quiet, not that I was complaining. I like the quiet, listening to the waves lap against the side of the ship as I keep watch, squinting as moonlight glinted off the blade of my katana and illuminating the room like a light. I liked watching the stars, though I would never admit it. I liked to think that Kuina was up there, supervising my progress and guiding me. I suppose I'll join her soon enough. The silence was broken by a weird sound escaping Luffy's throat, sort of like a frog being compressed under 2-ton elephants. I had only ever seen him once before like this, at Water 7 after his and Usopp's duel. His head was bowed and the shadow of his hat masked his eyes. His muscles were tense and his shoulder shook as he struggled to maintain his composure. He wasn't doing too well. He looked like a lost child, helpless in a huge world surrounded by strangers and not knowing where to find his mother, but trying to be a man about it. Zoro, he finally said, and despite the situation, I choked back a laugh. His voice sounded like a mixture between a toad with a frog in its throat and one of Usopp's ballads about himself. I couldn't bring myself to look at his face. I didn't like seeing my nakama cry, especially Luffy. This bonehead was the one I knew the best, and he was, though I hated to admit it, like a brother I guess. And I don't know any big brother who can watch their younger one cry. Even if they're not blood related. I don't believe you're dead, Luffy continued, not bothering to wipe away the silent tears now sliding down his cheek. I won't accept it. His face brightened. I'll give you some of my meat if you wake up. That sounds really inviting, I said. But thanks, you keep it. When nothing happened, Luffy shrank back into his depressed self. I don't want to continue to raffle without you, or Nakama, and Nakama don't leave anyone behind. We stick by each other no matter what. And now, I can't figure out if I do want to go on. He smiled weakly. But I know you would probably kick my ass if I didn't continue. I closed my mouth mid-sentence. Damn straight he would continue on the grand line. If this legend turns out to be nothing but a load of bullshit and I stay dead forever, I sure as hell do not want to have died for Luffy only to have him give up. Luffy took his time, talking about how stupid I was and laughing half-heartedly at all the memories we made. Remember Whiskey Peak when I tried to kill you for slaughtering the people there? That was fun. He recalled when we first met back in the East Blue, and wondered aloud how Kobe was doing. Kobe was such a crybaby then, at least we got to see him again. I wonder where he is now. Do you remember who that blonde guy was? He talked about that one island where all our memories were stolen and how I was stupid enough to get hypnotized into trying to kill him. That was really stupid of you to get taken advantage of, Zoro. But it was still kind of awesome at the same time. At one point, Luffy leaned over my face and pulled apart one of my eyelids as if checking for the millionth time if I really was sleeping. It was an eerie sight, looking at my own dead eyes. No sign of life glowed in my dilated pupils, staring up at nothing. Luffy sighed and sat back again, my eyelids sliding closed. A thought suddenly occurred to me. If I could overshadow, I was careful to remember to use that word. Sucked still sounds perverted, living people by touching them. Could it be simple enough that all I had to do was touch my body and I would be restored? But it was too easy, there was no way it could be so straightforward. I didn't want to look like an idiot if that was the case, but I couldn't just let my nakama suffer like this if it was that simple. Still, a part of me refrained from attempting. As much as I wanted to resurrect myself and return to the world of the living, I wanted to know what each of my crewmates would say about me when they thought no one was listening. So I didn't. I moved to sit on a bench directly across from my lamenting captain, looking out the window and watched the other crew members gathered in a small circle on the lawn, picking at the grass and talking. The two women had diverted themselves from the group and were talking animatedly. Nami waved her hands wildly and indicated the paper that Robin was taking notes on. Ah, what's that? I turned and froze, my invisible face an inch away from Luffy's. Without my noticing, he had snuck up on me and had leaned across the bench to get right in my face. I knew I shouldn't be worried. The worst that could happen is that I would overshadow him, and it would be broken once he moved away, but the rubber man's eyes were locked on mine like he could actually see me, and it sent a shiver down my spine. Moving slowly, I skirted around him until I had maneuvered my way completely around him and was standing behind him, breathing unnecessarily hard. Luffy's eyes had followed me, but he stayed put, turning to face me like he really could see me. His eyes narrowed, and he opened his mouth to speak. Is that? Oi, Luffy! A voice yelled, and someone banged on the door. We need to talk about something. Luffy opened the door and Usopp was revealed through the hatch, his eyes bloodshot from tears. We've been talking and there's things we need to discuss. What about? I don't know. Nami sent me to get you. Luffy nodded. Casting one forlorn look back at me, which still really creeped me out, he followed Usopp down the ladder. After a moment, I followed, sliding right through the floor to materialize on the rungs leading down to the main deck. I went slowly, and as I came, the conversation my nakama were having slowly materialized. We've been thinking, Nami was saying to Luffy as he approached. We as in Robin and I. Even if we get to Myth Island under the time limit, we don't have anyone on this ship besides Robin and I who Zoro could possibly have been in love with. We've compiled a list of the girls we've come across that could possibly have been candidates, but... I looked over her shoulder. Kaya, I knew her for what, 10 minutes, Vivi, pretty, but too whiny and weak, Alvita, who is that, anyway. Lola, I choked on a non-existent breath, Nojiko, Nami's sister. Khalifa, I recoiled at that one, Kokoro Basan, I resisted the urge to throw up, and several others who the girls had come up with, including their own names near the end. Sanji made awkward faces with each name, like he couldn't believe I would be stupid enough to fall for even one woman. I'm not denying masculine hormones or anything, but I'm seriously just not interested in women. So what the hell was I going to do? And we were thinking, too, Frankie interjected, and all eyes turned to the shipwright. The riddle also said that Zoro bro had to die in the honor of someone else. So who? Silence. Sanji looked uncomfortable, his eyes unreadable. Brook looked really weird too, staring at the arrow cook like he was sympathetic. Everyone else was ultimately confused. They slowly began murmuring among themselves. I think I'll go say words now, Sanji finally interrupted, raising his hand slightly. After receiving a nod from Luffy, Sanji ascended to the crow's nest, and I followed. He started out much like Luffy, just sitting and staring. His eyes were distant, but really pissed off, and I smirked. The guy looked so pitiful. If I ever get resurrected, I'm so going to hold it against him. You asshole, was the first thing he said, and I was expecting that. You just had to go and die, didn't you? You had to go and be the hero, sacrificing yourself for all our shitty sakes. He stood and began pacing the room, chomping on his cigarette. After a minute, all the sudden anger rage subsided and he stared forlornly at my body. I'm not going to tell anyone, he said. About the whole thing, I mean. You have your own honor to uphold, even in death. He looked out the window. Imagine what the rest of them would say if they ever found out. Even though I don't know exactly what happened, exactly how it went down, but I do know that it's not worth sharing when your pride is on the line. You just piss me off so much. The first time I met you I just hated your guts and I had no idea why. But now that I think about it, I think it was because you decided to fight Mihawk. You were prepared to die for your dream, but in contrast I was ready to die for Zeph's, defending the Bharati. You just paid attention to your own little motives and didn't account for the other people you would leave behind if you did. So self-centered. So get back here so I can kick your ass officially. And how dare you leave the ladies? Luffy's an idiot, Usopp's a coward, Chopper's a reindeer, and Frankie is too old. That leaves me to tend to their needs, and even though you didn't even realize it, you made each day interestingly boring. So congrats, Robin really enjoyed your company. Robin, my company. The damn woman didn't even look at me except when she needed something, and even then it was something stupid like rubbing lotion on her back or fetching a book from the library. I suppose that after all that shitty lovey-dovey crap, and we finally hit the grand line, his expression revealed him as humiliated. I see you as, a brother I never had. I cocked my head, confusion exploding in my mind. A brother? Since when? I hate his guts, he's so damn annoying, and I hate his overprotective nature, especially of Robin and Nami. If I learned one thing from Kuina, it's that women don't need protecting, and they hate it when they are implied to be weak. But if I thought about it, too, we did seem to have a fairly reasonable relationship, not one unlike brotherhood. Though we annoyed each other, we work well as a team, and we do have the same basic ideals, even if our methods are a bit different. And now that he has promised not to reveal my cause of death, I feel a bit indebted to him. I hate this, I'll have to find a way to repay him eventually. There was suddenly a soft rap at the door, and Sanji answered it. The newest addition to our crew, the skeletal musician Brook, appeared on the other side. His skull was still cracked from his battle with Ryuma, but his precious afro was still intact. May I enter, Sanji-san? He queried, and the cook nodded. The door was opened wider and the two men sat cross-legged on either side of my immobile form. I just want to say that I saw your valiant act, Brook said after a minute of silence. It truly affected me, and I believe it to be honorable. Sanji didn't say anything, but let out a puff of smoke and watched it dissipate into the air. It wasn't honorable, he said. I was just trying to save a useless Marimo. Brook shook his head. I disagree. You may not realize it, but you and Zoro are actually very much alike in your stubbornness and loyalty. Both of you were willing to throw away your lives for the sake of your captain, and I find that says a lot about Luffy himself. He has a knack for knowing the best people to have on his crew. Brook, what happened while I was unconscious? Sanji asked suddenly, and Brook complied. The skeleton talked about how he had gained consciousness as I had launched my Shishi Sun Sun on the Shibukai. He talked in admiration at my first request to replace my head for Luffy's. Sanji entered the picture then, offering his own head as well. And then his voice took on a more weary tone as he described the effects of the giant ball of pain I had endured, which had eventually claimed my life. Sanji didn't interrupt through the entire story, and I was amazed at how detailed the musician was. When the story was over, the cook breathed a ring of smoke. That explains why Luffy is lively as ever, and Zoro is dead, he said. I had assumed he would just be taken prisoner for public execution, but this. Brook smiled sadly. Loyalty is a man's best quality, he said. I can only imagine the vast amount the Straw Hat crew must possess in order to be a part of Luffy's life. Sanji grunted out a laugh. I suppose, he said. But that says a lot about you, too. Luffy's been hell-bent on a musician since we hit the Grand Line, and you must be something if you're the chosen one. I'm just a bag of old bones. And that's a part of it. Sanji smiled. A half-naked cyborg, a reindeer, 4 people with devil fruits, a man with a freakishly long nose, me with a curly eyebrow, and a green-headed guy, all crazy enough to break into Eni's lobby for one nakama. Nami-san is perfect and has no flaws. You fit in just fine. Yo-ho-ho-ho, Brook said softly. Thank you, Sanji-san. The two men sat in silence for a long time again, and I squinted at Brook cautiously. He had revealed he knew about my sacrifice and the events leading up to it, and those after. He hadn't said anything about not saying anything, and I did not want the crew to know what I had died for. They would never forgive me, especially Luffy. If I knew my captain, he would never let someone die for his sake, even if his own death was imminent. The deep moment was suddenly interrupted by a crash down below. Brook, Sanji and I rushed to the window. Luffy was buried in a pile of dishes and pans, tumbling out of the kitchen and earning him a nice-sized bruise on the head via Nami's fist. Damn rubber bastard, Sanji growled, wrenching open the door and clambering down the rungs. Upon hitting the deck, the blonde proceeded to strike the captain and tell him off. Brook chuckled and returned to the center of the room. His empty eye socket stared at my immobile body, his face less expression unreadable. Although I have known you a very short time, he said. I want to thank you again for retrieving my shadow. And, I also saw what happened. Your sacrifice was most noble, and I won't tell anyone, not unless you want me to. And I know this endeavor will pay off, so. He looked straight at me, his sockets meeting my eyes, and that same feeling ran down my spine as to when Luffy had found me. I suppose Brook had an excuse, already having died once and probably have left a piece of himself in the afterlife. Unless you tell me, I won't open my lips. Even though I don't have lips, yo-ho-ho-ho. He stood again and crossed to the door, stepping out onto the rungs and closing the room. Very slowly, the old skeleton descended to the main deck, where Luffy looked like he'd had a run-in with a lawnmower. I didn't follow, rather sitting on a bench and folding my hands behind my head. Deep sentiments so far, and I honestly am enjoying this, having people talk about me. Even if it's not in the exact form I imagined, it's still my name. I was grateful that Brook had promised to not reveal my cause of death. He must know something about honor in death, being dead himself. But that must have something to do with the possibility of his being able to see me, just like Luffy. I suspected it was the strong bond between the captain and I that allowed him to see me, what little there was left anyway. Judging by his questioning eyes, I must only be a greenish blur or tint in the air. I didn't dwell on that mystery for long, because I was focused on Brook and Sanji's sentiments. I was most bothered about the arrow cook's revealing of Robin's enjoying of my company, whatever he meant by that. Still, despite my curiosity, I was too mentally exhausted to think about it. The sun was still high, but I still felt that I had to at least rest my eyes. I had a feeling if I fell asleep, I legit would not wake up, legend or no. A flicker of movement caught my vision, and my instincts roused me into action. I reached automatically for my katana, standing in a defensive position to ward off any attack. However, I was surprised to see a single petal float to the ground and come to rest on the back of my hand. My body, that is. I narrowed my eyes. It was the type of flower that women's limbs turn into when they disappear. I swear, if she was eavesdropping, I am going to, shit. I don't know what I would do, but I would do something, count on that. I settled back down on the sofa, lying with my back against the soft cushions with my hands behind my head. I could hear shouts of Luffy and Sanji down below as they brawled, Nami yelling at them to shut up in the background. I smirked. Even with me gone, the crew never changes. My muscles had just begun to relax when a sensation filled me, and I had the weirdest inkling something was about to go horribly, horribly wrong. I sat up again and looked through the window, the giant sail bearing our mark fill with a plump wind. Everything seemed normal, and I couldn't shake the feeling. And that was when the sail suddenly laid flat, the gust gone, the wind vanished, the ship immobile, while still the clock ticks. Chapter 4, Obligations to Fulfill. Chapter 4, Obligations to Fulfill. I don't know. I'm not sure why myself. But if I were take even one step back, I believe that all those important oaths, promises and many other deals, till now, will all go to waste and I'll never be able to return before you, ever again. Roronoa Zoro. Nami, what's going on? The wind just stopped for some reason. The Straw Hats scrambled around the deck, hands waving in panic as they tried to fathom the sudden loss of locomotion. I stood to the side, a little panicky myself. With the wind gone, the ship wasn't going anywhere, and we were stuck still in the middle of the Florian Triangle. I figured we still had a long way to go until we actually reached Myth Island. Everyone calmed down. Sanji tried to take a hold of the situation, and was not succeeding. Luffy, Usopp, Chopper and Brook raced in circles, screaming obnoxiously, while Frankie just stared at the empty sail like he couldn't believe his eyes. Robin looked thoughtful, as if trying to calculate how long until they starved to death. Nami looked ready to explode. No cola, she growled. Which means no Channel Zero. No wind, no moving. This is the worst possible situation. Frankie, the blue-haired shipwright looked over, his expression a mix between angry and sad. What's up, Nami sis? We need cola for the paddle Sunny, right? He nodded. But we can still use the other channels. Another nod. They should be pre-stocked with fuel. I think I understand, Miss Navigator, Robin piped up from where she stood. Limbs sprouted from the deck and stopped the raging captain, sharpshooter, doctor and musician in their tracks, fingers raised to their mouths to silence them. Listen to Nami, please. Do you have a plan, Nami-san? Sanji asked, struggling to hide the excitement in his voice. I cut it, though, and cracked a small smile. Blackmail. Sanji, Brook, Nami immediately began issuing orders. Release the shark, submerge Mini Mary and find a grappling hook. Connect the ship to the sub and pull it along behind. Meanwhile, everyone else, grab oars and start rowing. Hi, Nami-san. Frankie directed the cook and musician to where they might find rope in the storage rooms, and the two men disappeared. Oars were gathered, and flung over the side of the ship as Nami changed the channel dock system to the corresponding levers. A few moments passed, and the dark shape of the shark submerge appeared in the water. Another minute, and Brook rolled out on the Mary, struggling to figure out how to work it. The rope was wrapped around Sunny's figurehead, and the ship slowly began moving. The oars barely reached the water, but that did not deter the Straw Hat crew. Luffy took his own and rowed back and forth with his monstrous strength. I couldn't help but smile, all the pain had left his body. It was like he had just woken fresh from a nap and chowed down on meat. Robin sprouted limbs and took 2 paddles for herself. Chopper and Usopp also took a single one for each, with a few helping hands courtesy of the Hana no Mi, and Nami was left to work with Frankie. The Sunny cut slowly through the water, but it was moving all the same. I walked between the ranks, wishing with the most deepest desire of my heart I could help them. Nami's face was sweaty, and she sucked her thumb where she had been stabbed by a splinter. Frankie put most of the effort into the rowing, but he looked weary too, like he'd never had to row a huge ship before, or at least he hadn't done it in a long time. Usopp's face was a mask of determination, even as his arms shook with the tension of one oar to himself, even if he had Robin's help. Chopper in his heavy point seemed to be faring reasonably well. Robin sat with the book in her hands, her eyes scanning the myth with a knowing gaze as her hands moved with the rhythm of her nakama. Luffy ignored all around him, his eyes fixated on the horizon in front of him. But as I moved in front of him, I could feel that eerie aura of his eyes following me, and it chilled me. This continued for maybe an hour, during which time I made myself comfortable in my usual spot, watching the progress of my nakama. Luffy continuously glanced back, lurching back forward when someone looked his way. Robin's gaze drifted toward me as well, but she might only have been drowning in nostalgia, remembering where I could always be found. Finally, Usopp's arms gave out, and he slumped down the deck, his arms shaking and his chest heaving. Immediately, 10 new limbs took his place, and Robin took the strain of 3 oars. I'm sorry, Usopp heaved. I can't do any more. We understand, Robin said, her own voice sounding thin with weariness. Go say your words to Zoro. My name jolted me into motion, and I stood up to follow the sharpshooter up to the crow's nest where my body lay. Usopp curled up on the bench, not able to look at it. I'm going to make this really fast, he said. But I never really thanked you for helping my save Kaya back in the East Blue. You didn't have to help me, not you, not Luffy, and not Nami. But you did anyway, you stopped Kuro. And now looking back, all those guys were child's play compared to some of the stronger people here in the Grand Line, who will in turn be weaker than the New World. Usopp wiped a tear from his eyes. Thank you. I really looked up to you, Yano. You were the strongest, most badass guy in the world, and that was exactly who I wanted to be. We've had our tough times, like Water 7, but we all came together in the end, and that's what really counts. Just come back and give me something else to look up to. Zoro, the guy who just can't seem to die. He dies and just comes back to life again. Zoro, so indestructible, hell spits him back out every time. That's who I want to be. Strong, brave, respected. The long-nosed man was silent for a few minutes, and I took this opportunity to dwell on his words. An idol, huh? I didn't see myself like that, but then again, I wasn't the most open book in the universe. But still, it was nice to be looked up to like a fatherly figure. The first thing that came to my mind just so happened to be a father. I sure as hell was not ready for that. Usopp started talking again, just relaying various memories and comments. He made fun of my perfect sense of direction, and did just as Luffy had done, poking at my recklessness and idiocy. And I'll admit it was kind of funny how he looked at it. He mentioned saving my ass at varying points on our voyage, and I scoffed. He was the one who handcuffed us together, thank you very much. Usopp. A voice yelled, and we both looked down at the deck where Nami was waving her hand to get his attention. When she noticed him, she beckoned for him to come down again. We hit the deck, and the sniper joined Nami at her oar. The navigator was dripping sweat, dark patches on her ripped Thriller-bark t-shirt. Her arms shook, but her tempo did not cease. Keep rowing, she said. Let Chopper go now. I looked over. Chopper had moved to brain point and had left his oar dragging the water as he panted for breath. Frankie had taken over for him, his large hands rowing effortlessly. I felt a twang of sympathy for the little doctor. The little guy didn't have hardly any stamina, but the endurance he did have was resilient. Usopp took over his oar again, and Robin's limbs disappeared in a puff of petals, only to reappear again on Nami's paddle. The reindeer clambered up to the crow's nest, and as I had with the other 5 members of the crew, I followed him up. Up and down, up and down. It was starting to be a bit irksome, but I still wanted to be a part of my crew even for a little while longer, especially if this legend was bullshit. Chopper wasted no time bursting into fresh tears as he picked at the slightly red bandages wrapped carefully around my body's arms. Zoro, he whispered, why'd you go? You're always there to protect me, always, and I really want you to come back. Come back so I can heal your wounds again. You're strong, Zoro. No matter how many times you get hurt, you're still strong as ever, and trust me, I know. I'm the one healing you all the damn time. I've seen firsthand how bad things get for you, and I am confident there is no wound of yours I can't cure. Except for this one, I can't bring back the dead. I'm not demented like Hogback and Mariah, and I'm not insane enough to try and play with human life recklessly. But I'm counting on this ceremony to bring you back. And if you do, I promise never to let this happen again. I'll never let you, or any of our other Nakama, die. Not like this. I felt a ping in my heart. God damn it, being dead is making me soft. Just watching the little guy made me feel really angry at myself, like come on, Zoro, how dare you make Chopper cry. Still, he was being more or less a man about it, sobering up and wiping his nose, gobs of nasty snot clumping in his fur. Who would you be in love with, Zoro? Chopper asked suddenly, his voice curious. Nami, I can't really see that. You guys are more like bickering siblings than anything else. Robin, he paused here. It doesn't take a lot to realize when 2 people like each other, and they're the only 2 that don't notice. I grit my teeth. Robin and I, seriously. I was done listening to the doctor's lament, so I faded through the door. I was actually getting used this by now. It's really handy, and joined the rest of my Nakama down below. While Chopper and I had been up in the nest, Brook and Sanji had switched out with the women, and now Nami piloted the Mini Mary as Robin took over the submarine. Brook and Sanji each heaved the oars with all their might, the skeleton throwing in an occasional skull joke to unsuccessfully lighten the mood. Frankie now had 1 oar to himself, and didn't seem to mind. A Den was perched on his shoulder and relayed messages from Nami in the sub back up to the shipwright. There were very little conversations as the next hour passed. Chopper came down 10 minutes after I did, and retook his post at the oar. Frankie went up next, but I was too lazy to follow him up. He stayed up for about 10 minutes, and when he returned to the deck, I overshadowed him and tapped into his memories, which I found was actually very cool. Yo, Zoro bro, I didn't know you for very long at all, and I don't know practically anything that you do about the crew, you being first mate and all, but I do know you kick some serious ass. And you have got some serious skill if you could take on Jabra and Kaku while handcuffed, and completely defeat the Giraffe Man. You and your crew are just completely insane, and I guess I don't fall far from that tree. But still, we're like brothers, man, and I really wish you'd come back so we can get to know each other a little more. Okay. Frankie was never one to really elaborate from what I knew, so I wasn't expecting much from him in the first place, but it was still nice to know he cared. The man was skilled beyond his years, and he knew his place, but even he knew the Straw Hat Pirates weren't a crew, were a family. God damn it, now I'm sounding gushy. Hey, Frankie, Nami's voice came from the den on his shoulder, and he rode with one hand as he held the tiny snail to his face. What is it? The sonar on the shark submerges picking up a land mass about 100 clicks to the northeast, in the direction the log pose is pointing. It may be Myth Island, so could you help turn the ship? Sure thing, Frankie said. What did she say, Frankie-san? Brook asked from his oar. Nami says we're coming close to Myth Island, the shipwright reported. About 100 clicks northeast. Yosh, Luffy shouted, and I started at the sound of his voice. I had almost forgotten the loud and ridiculously obnoxious captain was here. Hard to port. I'll get the wheel, Usopp said, and raced to the helm. The figurehead was already tilting to the left as Nami and Robin steered the tugboats in the correct direction. With combined efforts, soon the Sunny was carving a path through the waves toward Myth Island. My nakama seemed to have a spurt of adrenaline, because the ship seemed to move faster. I found myself anticipating the arrival. As the many upsides being a ghost is, as in overshadowing and phasing through solids, I missed the benefits of being alive. Of feeling warmth, touch, taste. I could smell, but it wasn't the same. I couldn't enjoy it as well as I could if I had a live body to bask in. Though I had been thinking about it as well. If this legend required me to have been in love, then the first female that came to my mind was Kuina. I didn't exactly love her, but she was my goal, and as a little kid, that counted as love to me. But Kuina is dead, so that would never work. And none of the women we'd met made any sort of romantic connection to me, except that marine woman Tashigi something or other, but she doesn't count. It had to be as Chopper said. Unconscious attraction, unrecognized affection. It was the mushy-gushy stuff again, but it was really the only explanation I could think of. Which left Nami and Robin, the navigator and archaeologist, cartographer and historian. I didn't have long to dwell on the subject, however, because my ghostly nose suddenly caught a waft of a scent that did not belong with the peaceful salty air. It was tangy and smoky, like someone lit a bonfire in the middle of the ocean. The smoke carried with the wind currents, swirling around the ship and clogging noses. Chopper held a hand to his strange blue nose. What is that horrible smell? Frankie realized a split second before I did. His pupils shrank as his eyes located the source of the scent. 12 ships had appeared on the horizon, each painted a dull sea green with a white seagull emblazoned on the hull. 3 cannons protruded from the front of the vessel, all trained on the lion ship. White sails were also flat against the mast, so 12 oars hit the water from either side of each ship, propelling it forward with greater speed than the Sunny. Printed on the white sail was a word that was possibly the worst thing that could happen right now. Marines, Sanji groaned. Damn it. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is, The Stuff of Legends by 1004 Angel. Chapter 5 Xanadu's. When the world shoves you around, you just gotta stand up and shove right back. It's not like somebody's gonna save you if you start babbling excuses. Roronoa Zoro. Mugiwara no Ichimi. A loud voice boomed through a bullhorn, its origin from the largest marine battleship in front of us. Surrender now and we promise you are entitled to fair trial. The Sunny stopped moving as the crew dropped the oars and stood at the front of the deck, shoulder to shoulder, expressions tense and angry. Down below, the shark submerged surfaced, and the hatch opened to reveal Robin, looking curiously across the water. I joined my nakama, standing off the side so as to not distract from the main issue. Luffy moved to stand on his signature spot at the lion's head, one hand gripping the mane for support. He swelled his chest with a huge breath. No way, he yelled back. We're going to Myth Island to bring back Zoro. Don't get in our way. Don't tell them that. Nami, Usopp, and Sanji raged, but it was too late. Bring back Roronoa, the marine replied. Is he dead? That's right, and if you stop me from bringing him back I'll kill all your asses single-handed. There was silence on the other end, and I could practically see them laughing at the foolish pirates' attempts at resurrection. Luffy looked ready to explode with energy, bouncing on the balls of his feet like he didn't know what to do with himself. The Straw Hats remained silent as the Marines spoke again. We'll let you go, he said. If you give us Roronoa Zoro. Don't surrender, and we'll sink your ship. Luffy snapped. Like hell, he responded without a moment's hesitation. The rest of the crew joined in, screaming out protests and rants. Even Robin contributed, and I was surprised to see a new fire burning in her eyes, a passion to protect. A smile unconsciously pulled at my lips, and a laugh burst from my throat. We had done this same exact thing back when Bartholomew Kuma threatened us with a bomb in exchange for Luffy's head. I distinctly remember yelling, "We refuse." Robin's face had been passive as usual, even in the event her captain was threatened. If now, when the dead body of a lower-ranking nakama is in jeopardy, she protests. Very well, the Marine spoke up again, cutting through the noise. Prepare yourselves to die. The foremost ship fired its cannons, the iron spheres hurtling toward us at top speed. Luffy leapt into the air, inflating himself into Fusen mode. The balls bounced off his body, redirected back at their owners, falling into the ocean with a massive fountain of seawater. The rubberman crashed back to the deck. Nami, Robin, he yelled. Take Zoro and keep going to the island. But, Nami began to argue, but Luffy cut her off with a look. You two are the only ones Zoro could have loved, Usopp said, catching on. So you two have to continue no matter what. Luffy confirmed. Let us deal with the Navy. More cannonballs were fired, and the Straw Hat crew instantly mobilized. The men leapt into action, deflecting the onslaught and preparing to board the oncoming marine ships. Frankie was out of cola, so he couldn't be of much help, but he didn't seem interested in the attack. He stroked his chin, thinking hard as the other crew members raced around him as the marine ships drew closer. A light bulb might as well have flickered to life above his head, because he suddenly grinned and raced below deck. See and fleur, came a cry from below. Wing. Robin suddenly came flying from below, 100 arms sprouting from her back and meshing together to form 2 massive wings, catching the light of a dying sun. I squinted, and as she floated in front of the rays, her form was backlit and made her seem to glow with an inner beauty. An angel, I thought. Am I finally getting a glimpse of heaven before I descend into hell? She continued on, and the light faded. I blinked the uncharacteristic thoughts from my mind and watched as Robin landed on the roof of the crow's nest and Nami finally scrambled on deck, her climatact in hand. The navigator dodged one of Luffy's punches directed at an oncoming cannonball and yelled something up at the archaeologist. It was lost in the clamor of cannon fire, but I caught a disembodied ear vanish from her back. I smiled and watched as Robin opened the hatch on the roof and slipped inside, vanishing from view. Nami watched with anxiety, her fingers wrapped tightly around the steel blue of her weapon. A minute passed, and nothing happened. I had half a mind to go up there and watch the goings-on, when Nami suddenly went rigid, her pupils shrinking in horror as she slowly looked up at the darkening sky, the moon already rising into the black expanse. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh please no. What is it, Nami?" Chopper asked, noticing her horrified expression. She looked back at the doctor, her expression exposing her as terrified. "A cyclone is coming," she reported. "And a big one by the feel of the air temperature." Chopper froze, his eyes bugging from his head almost in a comical fashion. "Nani," he screeched. "Everyone." Nami yelled to get her Nakama's attention, but they were all too preoccupied with the fight to heed her words. She tried grabbing Usopp's arm as he ran past, but the sniper was too distracted to even register the noise. She glanced back up at the sky again, where dark clouds could be easily seen even against the night sky. The sea began to roll, and the wind picked up, carrying the Sunny forward and dragging the oars behind. "Everyone, please," Nami screamed. "Cyclone, right now." She looked up just as rain finally began to fall. The sea grew wilder, swelling to heights as tall as 20 feet. Marines and pirates alike stopped to stare at the maelstrom that had snuck up on them. The wind roared in their ears, rain and hail lashing against exposed skin, soaking all unprotected bodies to the bone. "Nami." A voice rose above the chaos. Robin had finally emerged from the crow's nest, her arm wrapped around my chest in what looked like an uncomfortable fashion. Her hair was plastered to her face the moment the door was opened, her eyes awaiting further instructions from the expert navigator. Nami grunted as a huge gust of wind nearly blasted her off her feet. "Bring him down," she yelled. "We'll go in the shark submerge, the Mini Mary is too dangerous." Robin didn't seem to hear, and strained to pick up the words torn to pieces by the wind. A huge wave suddenly crashed on deck, sending the crew rolling to the deck. "Yug," Luffy moaned as he was doused in seawater. "Nami, geet going GGG. Open fire," ordered a voice, and the Marines fired another volley. A projectile crashed into the ship, barely denting the wood but shoving the ship sideways into another Marine vessel that had pulled up alongside the Sunny. With a yell, Marine officers boarded the deck, and the straw hats were consumed. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the sky for a split second and leaving even me dazed. I had trouble dodging flailing bodies. If I were overshadowed now, there would be less chance I would be able to follow Nami and Robin in my body, and I didn't want to know what would happen if body and spirit were separated. Thunder rolled, crashing on our ears. More lightning, this time dangerously close. I found refuge on the rungs to the nest and wished desperately I could help Robin lug my body out of the hole in the ceiling and out on the slippery roof, all without falling. Despite having several arms latched on for extra support, with the torrents of rain and waves of seawater, the devil fruit user was losing strength. "Drop it," Nami yelled, whacking a Marine over the head with her climatact. "If that's the best we can do, just drop him." "Which?" I yelled. "I want that in pristine condition when I get back. If you go breaking a leg I won't forgive you." Robin wasn't able to. At that moment, another lightning bolt flashed. It was only a split second, but suddenly the entire mast was crackling with electricity, and Robin's scream of pain could be heard even over the clamor of the ongoing battle. My eyes narrowed, and I gripped the rungs so tight my already transparent knuckles turned white. A rage swelled in my chest that would have put the waves to shame, but I couldn't place its source. I was just suddenly so angry that for my sake my Nakama were suffering, and I couldn't do anything about it. I would never forgive myself if any one of them were hurt, but Robin's scream hit me deep. That intense tug in my gut, the same one when she was attacked by Enel and Aokiji, it was back. That urge to protect. The mast had been completely fried, a gaping hole in the center where the bolt had struck. Even Adam's wood couldn't withstand lightning. Up above, Robin went limp, her limbs vanishing. "Robin!" Nami screamed. "Robin-chan!" Sanji cried, disposing of his group of Marines and running to catch her as she slipped from the slick tile and toppled back to the deck. The cook managed to catch her, skin dark from electrocution, but still conscious and functional. "Thank you, Sanji-san," she murmured. "But, Zoro." Nami and Sanji exchanged glances, each staring up at the nest. My body was lying half in and half out of the room, my hair and bandages soaked through, looking like a pathetic rag doll. The force of the wind on the ruined mast was too great, and it snapped completely in half. "Oh shit," I yelled, releasing my hold on the mast as it slowly began falling toward the ocean, taking my body with it. All was lost if it couldn't be recovered, and everyone was preoccupied with the Marines to notice. The only available person was Nami-san, Sanji said, lowering Robin to the deck. lashing out with a foot to take out a marine who had snuck up behind. Take Robin-chan somewhere safe while I get the stupid Marimo. Wait, Sanji-kun, Nami yelled, but it was too late. Sanji had already kicked off his shoes and was diving for the rail. It's too dangerous, she shrieked. You'll be carried away by the currents and drown. Sanji had hit the water before she had finished her sentence. Nami sis. She turned, Robin's arm over her shoulder, and I felt a sudden twinge of jealousy. I should be the one supported the historian if it was my fault this had happened. To establish a medium, I dodged Chopper's heavy gong and overshadowed Nami, looking through her eyes to see Frankie suddenly appear from below deck, pushing his sunglasses back onto his forehead. Frankie. Nami, I scolded. Where the hell have you been? Making you guys a boat, the blue-haired shipwright explained, a bit confused as to why there was rain and wind and a raging sea. What happened out here? He suddenly noticed the broken mast. Sonny, what happened to my ship? Never mind that. Nami, I interrupted. Zoro's body fell overboard and Sanji-kun's gone to get him. As soon as he gets back we'll leave. Let's go on and see what Frankie has created for us, Robin suggested, and Nami, I turned to look at her head on. Up close, her eyes were heavy with pain and sadness I had only seen in Eni's lobby, but this time it was a different kind of pain, one I couldn't fully describe without it sounding romantic. But underneath that layer was one of a pure heart, full of determination and confidence to see this through to the end. Nami, I cast one last look at the ocean before nodding and moving away, following Frankie down into the workshop. I didn't immediately follow, running to the rail to see if the idiot cook had surfaced yet. The mast was somehow holding on to the ship with a single board, but it didn't look like it would last long. My eyes scanned the water frantically, not even caring if I unexpectedly overshadowed a passing marine or pirate. Finally, I spotted a flash of yellow and white in the midst of the chaos, and I let out a whoop as I spotted Sanji's hair and my soaking bandages against the dark blue and green of the boiling sea. Turning away, I raced down below decks, desperately trying to catch up to the girls before they set sail without me. I burst through a door that had been left open and balked as the door to the channel for the shark submerge was opened again to evict the hasty vessel Frankie had crafted. The sub was still floating in the water, but it wouldn't accommodate 3 people in a body. There was no denying Sanji would have to accompany us now that he was at the mercy of the currents. Frankie had fashioned a bit of a larger version of the Mini Mary, but it was larger and more durable for stormy weather. It seated 6 people tightly compacted together under a wooden roof reinforced with steel to prevent leaks. It had a hurried decor job of still wet dark green paint. A porthole was set into the side, and through it I could see Nami taking the controls. Only our shipwright was good enough to build something like this in 10 minutes. Frankie was off to one side, guiding out the newest creation. As the door was opened, and the ship began to meet the maelstrom beyond, I jerked myself into action and ran forward, making a dive for the rear of the ship. I had barely phased through and hit the interior before the full force of the storm hit, and the tiny ship was rocked violently to the side. Had I been alive, my head would have collided roughly with the side of the boat and I would be unconscious. Instead, my head went right through and pulled back again, falling back to the floor with a moan. The rocking and rolling of the vessel made me sick to my stomach, but I managed to slide against the wall and propping myself up to watch the goings-on. Nami was doing her best to keep herself calm as she expertly steered the craft through the raging waves while Robin had her eyes pressed against the window, scanning the waves for that telltale sign of blonde. I looked through the porthole on the other wall to witness the progress of the departing ship. As I watched, the huge arm suddenly appeared above the Sunny and crashed into a marine warship, crushing it to pieces. As the debris crashed into the waves, I spotted Sanji break the surface of the water, his tie wrapped around my body's wrists so that they were secure around his neck and had little chance of sliding off. His shoulders were bare, so I assumed his shirt was wrapped around our waists. How he had managed all that in a damn cyclone is beyond me, but somehow he had. I looked back around. Robin, I yelled. Over here, he's over here. Robin didn't even twitch. Voice, work, come on, seriously. I lurched to my feet as the ship hit another swell. I fell forward, overshadowing the archaeologist. My vision immediately zoomed in 20/20, looking through the woman's eyes. I can't bloom eyes outside the ship without blinding myself, Robin, I thought. If I could even hold it with all the seawater. You idiot, I thought, desperately channeling my own words into her mind. I didn't know if she registered it or not, but I went on anyway. There are 2 windows. Try the other one. Robin's mind went blank. Zoro. The second window, Baka. Geez, and you call yourself a historian. Very slowly, Robin's vision shifted behind her, stumbling over coiled rope on the floor and looking through the second porthole, through which Sanji was clearly visible battling against the waves. Incredible, Robin's mind marveled. Zoro-san is still Zoro-san even when he's not here. Of course I am, I muttered. Now tell Nami about the arrow cook so he doesn't let my body drown. With that, I withdrew from Robin's mind and left her body, backing up to regain my own body and mind for myself. Nami, I see him. Robin said immediately, growing a hand from Nami's arm and pulling the wheel to the right. The navigator shuddered, still not quite used to disembodied limbs blooming from her body. But as Sanji entered her field of vision, all thoughts of third arms vanished, and she put the metal to the metal, speeding the ship over the raging ocean toward the cook in distress. "Robin, can you pull him in?" Nami yelled. "I think so. Then get on it." Robin reached the handle that would open the door to the ship, shading her eyes with a spare hand while blooming an entire line of them from the ship's hull. "Sanji," she yelled over the roar of the wind. "Grab on." Sanji didn't hear her over his struggles, and was suddenly attacked by a current, pulled farther away from the tiny boat. I grit my teeth. Do I have to do every damn thing by myself? I raged, and phased through the wall and into the storm, keeping the bottoms of my feet solid as I ran across the tops of waves. Seeing as my body was only a spirit and made of pretty much solid smoke, the wind would rip a piece of my body away, and I would momentarily stop to focus and reform a lost arm or foot before I could continue. The first time it happened I nearly had a heart attack even though I don't have a heart, and the moment I wished for my left arm to return it did. This is what Logia users must feel like, I figured, and continued running. I'm pretty sure if not for my will and desire to survive, I would not have survived this long. Finally, with a raw-throated yell, I launched myself the last few feet and finally managed to overshadow the stupid cook. What I felt was a sudden wave of pain, fear, and terrifying truth that he was going to die. That was what Sanji was feeling right then and there, all hope gone with the current. Still, I kicked furiously at the waves, and I thrust my own words into his thoughts, just like I had with Robin. "Oi, dartboard, turn around right now. Shit, now I'm going insane. I have Marimo's voice in my head. Turn around, damn it." To the best of his ability, with me helping a bit, I somehow managed to rotate 180 degrees, enough to see the ship with Robin hanging out of it through the blinding rain. My heart began beating faster, and fire was suddenly rekindled in the cook's heart. He kicked faster, freestyling as best he could through the raging sea, leaving me behind again. Cursing this damn yukata the spirit world place thing would ever had clad me in, I raced after him, keeping an eye on my body's prone form still strewn across Sanji's back like a sack of potatoes. I couldn't be too picky, thought. Despite my not wanting to admit it, Sanji had risked his life to save one already lost. Maybe the guy had some guts after all. I phased through the ship just as Robin grabbed the knot holding the two bodies together and dragged them inside, slamming the door behind them and blocking out the rain. All three of them were soaked to the skin, shivering uncontrollably. Nami received the okay from Robin and began moving the boat away from the Thousand Sunny and the rest of the crew, following the log post toward Myth Island. "Here you are, Sanji-san," Robin said, kneeling down and handing him a thick towel to wrap around his bare chest. My body had been removed and wrapped in a towel, taking up a few seats on benches near the back of the boat. "Thank you, Robin-chan," Sanji said. "But you take it. There's only a few, and you need it more than I do." "Thanks, very kind, but I do believe you were the one who rescued Zoro-san," Robin pointed out and threw the towel at him. "Take it." Sanji gave up and accepted it, wrapping the warm cloth around his bare chest. "How many hours left?" Robin looked out the window, where the cyclone was slowly dissipating from existence behind them and the night sky was clear once again. "If I had to venture a guess," she said, "I would say less than 12 hours. Chapter 6 Reconcile Your Heart. Well, how about this? My luck versus this thing's curse. Wanna see who's stronger? If I lose, then I'm just that much of a man anyways. Roronoa Zoro." Robin woke with a start, sitting up and letting out a yawn, raising her arms above her head. I looked up from my spot near the back of the boat, lounging next to my body and counting the stars through the window. I had tried to sleep, but it seemed in this ghostly state I wasn't allowed to. The historian blinked the sleep from her eyes, staring with hazy vision at the radar and sonar devices built into our simple vessel. Confirming to the best of her knowledge that we were, in fact, on course, she turned her attention to me, or the physical me anyway. It had begun to take it as a bad sign that because I had developed a sense of difference between the physical world and the spirit realm, that I was losing myself mentally, and before long I wouldn't know anything. Already I was having trouble remembering Kuina's face. A few minutes and I might forget her completely. The thought scared me, and I wrapped my arms around my knees as if that would sustain my memory longer. How long until I forget my crew, my friends? Robin shuffled around Sanji's snoring form, and Nami propped up against the far wall, her head bowed over her chest in slumber, looking very peaceful. She did her best not to disturb them as she situated herself next to my head. I scooted over to accommodate the extra room. I didn't feel like overshadowing anyone. "Hello, Kenshi-san," she began. "I always wondered, did you like being referred to as that? I try not to say that as much anymore, not since Eni's lobby. But I still think it's very nice." Robin was silent for a long while, and I mulled over it for a while. No, I hadn't really liked being referred to as simply Swordsman-san, but I wasn't going to object to it. After all, I didn't really fully trust her until I learned she actually sacrificed herself for us, and that was when I really and truly believed she was on our side and wouldn't double-cross us like I had initially thought. And then she called me Zoro, and I realized I liked how my name rolled off her lips, and preferred it to her petty nickname. Robin looked out the window. Wouldn't it be strange if you were a ghost and is listening to everything we're saying? That would be interesting, wouldn't it? I almost stopped breathing, not that would have mattered anyway. It was like she knew I really was there, or her guessing skills were ridiculously accurate. She wasn't looking at me like Luffy and Brook were, but I remembered back on Thriller Bark when news of my death was first introduced. She hadn't been staring at my body, but rather squinting at where I had been standing on observation. A chill crept down my spine. Robin was silent again for a while, so long I expected she had fallen asleep again. A rising sun forced its way through the glass, breaking into a tiny rainbow dancing across the back of her hand. She still wore her outfit from Thriller Bark, as did most of the other crew, but her ragged appearance just made her that much more beautiful. Beautiful. There's something I wanted to tell you, she said suddenly, breaking me from my thoughts. Something the others couldn't hear. Especially not Sanji-san. I was interested suddenly, and leaned forward from my slumped position to listen harder. What was so important that she couldn't tell anyone? Robin was known to keep secrets, but recently she had begun opening up more and more, and I had thought I knew everything worthwhile about her. Excluding her apparently terrifying past, she had nothing to hide directly from us. It's been weighing on my mind for some time, she continued. And I suppose you would know that feeling of having something building up inside you until you feel you may burst with the pressure. But now I think I may have finally found a time to reveal it. Robin examined her fingers, which I noticed seemed like a very un-Robin-like move. Zoro, IW. My body suddenly began to glow. Well, not the entire thing. Just the inside of my left forearm, a light green color seeping through the still damp cloths binding my wounded form. Robin's eyes locked on the supernatural effect, her hands curious as she slowly began to unite the white strips as other limbs bloomed from the shipboards and shook Nami and Sanji awake. MMMMMRUGLE. Wake up, Nami, Sanji-san, Robin said urgently. It's urgent. What is it, Robin-chan? Sanji mumbled, rubbing his eye. Zoro is glowing. Both the navigator and cook were by her side in an instant, their eyes bright and alert as they watched Robin pull away the final strip to reveal the source of the strange green light. I leaned in as well, taking in a sharp breath with my nakama. What is? Nami marveled, running a hand across the scarred skin. Sanji blinked like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Impossible. But very real, Robin whispered. Numbers had been etched into my arm, glowing with a soft green aura. 3 sets of them, separated by a colon, like a digital clock. The farthest right set of numbers was slowly counting down from 60. As I watched, it hit 0, resetting itself back to 60 as the center number moved from an 8 to a 7. It's a timer, said Nami incredulously. If we're to assume that this is a clock, then this has to be seconds, she indicated the farthest right set. This minutes, the middle numbers. And hours. The farthest left, which beheld an 8. So this must be how much time we have left until we've lost Zoro forever, Sanji concluded. 8 hours, 7 minutes and 36 seconds, Robin summarized. How close are we to Myth Island? Nami glanced at the log post programmed into the dashboard. Almost. About 1 hour more. We can't afford that, Sanji said. Did Frankie give us any paddles? After a quick glance, it was confirmed that in the rush of the battle, the shipwright had failed to provide oars. There was a brief discussion, and the 3 straw hats agreed to speed up the process of transportation by each ripping out a board of the ceiling and positioning themselves on each side of the boat. Robin bloomed several long arms from the ship and doubled the speed of the ship. Sanji strapped 2 boards to his feet and slipped into the water behind the tiny ship, using his feet to paddle rather than his hands. The sounds of snapping wood was lost in a blur, and my mind suddenly blacked for a moment, temporarily forgetting I even existed. I closed my eyes, struggling to grasp my unknown identity. A series of images raced across the front of my subconscious, a tall old man smiling and handing me a white sword. A thick-set man with a bazooka, 2 guys with strange haircuts calling me Iniki, a little girl in a striped dress, a blonde man with a bowl cut and double chin, a man with an axe for an arm, a boy in a red vest, a man with a big red nose, an orange-haired girl, a giant cat, a small boat with a ram figurehead. The pictures moved too quickly for me to confirm the identities of the people, but there was this feeling at the back of my mind that I knew all of them. In a flash, my memories suddenly returned. I gave a small cry as my brain was suddenly filled with them, and shook my head, clearing my thoughts. I remembered who I was, what my situation was, and how I had gotten here. But I couldn't recall how I had met my crew. Did I meet them at the Barati? Or was it that fishman who had dictated that island and, what was her name? Nalu. Wait, Nami. I hugged my arms to my chest, my eyes widening in disbelief. How could I forget her when she was standing right in front of me, moving her board back and forth with a look of fierce determination on her face? How long until I forgot the rest of them? How long? I sat huddled in a corner, my arms wrapped around my knees as if that would stop my random mind blanks. I could remember each one, but every time a sliver of my memory was erased. After the latest, about a minute ago, I couldn't recall anything before someplace called Logatown. There it is. I looked up to the sound of the blonde guy, Sanji, calling out to the 2 women. They both looked up, and I followed their gaze to the small dark mass that had appeared on the horizon. Their confidence restored, it seemed as if the ship seemed to travel even faster. As I watched, the small hill that was the island drew closer and increased in size, both in width and height. From what I could see, 4 huge towers stood to the 4 cardinal points, all equal disappearing into the lowest cloud bank. At the base was a huge forest filled with lush flora. A tributary could be seen flowing into the island from the ocean and disappearing through the foliage. "Let's head into that small river," the orange girl said, "Nami. We'll be safer from prying eyes, and maybe find a town where we can get information." Robin nodded her agreement, and the ship was turned toward the mouth of the inlet. I felt another wave of memory lapse coming on, and I desperately fought it back as the island finally loomed high above us, the 4 towers rising high into the sky like the knock upstream and disappearing into the clouds. I felt a sense of vertigo just looking up at their extreme height. The nausea distracted me from concentrating on the amnesia, and the same process happened again, the images. A girl with a sword, the boy with the red vest almost beheaded by a weird man with a ridiculously big nose, a tall mountain, a huge whale. And that was it. Everything before Whiskey Peak had vanished. That sense of having probably over half of your life gone was terrifying. I distracted myself by concentrating on remembering my Nakama's names as our tiny ship met the river and slowly navigated our way through the forest. Lucky, Aesop, Nancy, Sandy, Robin, Frankie, Brooke, and me, Zuko. I grit my teeth. No, some of those were wrong. The first 4, try as I might, their true names evaded me, standing on the tip of my tongue and refusing to leave my lips. It was infuriating, and my own name sounded strange, too. Was it real? "Oi, Nami, what's the plan?" said the blonde one. "Sammy, right, no, fine, Sandy sounds good," but he had called the orange-haired girl Nami. I had to remember it. Nami, 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 Sandy, 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 Robin, 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 Robin. The addressed orange-haired girl turned. "Currently, I have no idea." She looked to Robin, who was watching the forest rush by outside with interest. "What's Zoro's time?" "Zoro. What's she talking about me?" Robin leaned over, running a hand over my body still lying in the corner, "so it must be me. Remember, Zoro, Zoro, Zoro. 7 hours, 46 minutes. So we're running out of time." Nancy looked to the forward window. "There should be a town somewhere on this river, and we can figure out something there." "And if there isn't?" Nancy looked up toward the 4 towers. "I'm assuming those are the highest temples the legend talked about." "Robin, can you recite it again?" Robin closed her eyes as if remembering. "If a man dies in the honor of another, bring that man to the highest temple on the highest mountain and lay his body in the river Chai. Should that man been in love with a woman in his life, said woman should revive him within the waters as the sun rises. Should this occur, the man whose life was lost shall be returned to the world of the living. Such a ritual should be completed within 48 hours of the man's death." "Those don't look like mountains to me," said Sandy, staring at the towers. "We have to assume that that's what it means," Nancy snapped back. She suddenly seemed to realize her tone, and covered her mouth with a hand. "I'm sorry, Sanji-kun. I'm just a bit worked up." We continued in silence. A mist settled over the river, shrouding us in a blanket of white and hiding the riverbank from view. Nancy steered the boat steadily through the water, her eyes fixed ahead of her. Sandy and Robin sat together by my body, staring occasionally down at it like it would suddenly disappear and their efforts would be in vain. Meanwhile, I was still repeating their names in my mind to prevent another wave of amnesia. Lucky, Nancy, Aesop, Sammy. The ship suddenly jerked to a halt, grinding hard against something solid beneath us. Nancy cried out as she tumbled from her seat, and Sammy lunged to catch her, his one visible eye transforming to a tiny heart in his head as her breasts were met with his arms. Robin tripped and landed hard next to my body, her elbow on my partially shredded stomach band. She didn't move from that spot even as Sammy and Nancy corrected their stance. "What just happened?" asked Sammy. "We probably hit a reef," Robin said, finally moving and opening the door, letting in a small stream of fog. "I doubt we'll be able to go any farther on the boat." The 3 disembarked our tiny means of transportation, staring around them in wonder. With a quick wave of Nancy's Klimatak, the mist was dispersed, and we found we had indeed run against rocks jutting from the bottom of the river. We were standing on a bed of damp moss, what looked like a trail cutting a path through the underbrush leading into the forest. The river continued on, and I spotted something being carried away with the current. "A basket," said Nancy incredulously. "This island must be inhabited then. Perhaps if we follow the river, we will come across a village," Robin suggested. "Or we could take the trail," Sandy said. "It has to be there for a reason." I didn't know which route to take. If I ever came to a conclusion, I could always overshadow one of them and force my thoughts into their mind again. I looked toward the trail to examine the footing when a movement caught my eye. I whipped around, instinctively reaching for katana that weren't there. I squinted toward a tree, where I was certain I had seen someone duck behind the trunk. I took a step toward it, when my 3 nakama finally came to a decision. "The trail it is," said Nancy. "Who will carry Zoro?" Zoro. Not Zuko. Maybe we could make a crude wagon out of our ship. That would take too long. We could hogtie him to a long stick and carry him between us, was the suggestion that brought silence to Nancy and Sandy. Robin cocked her head a bit like it was perfectly valid option. Why not? Nancy and Sandy exchanged glances. Even without overshadowing them, I could immediately tell they weren't completely against the idea. Neither of them could come up with a valid alternative, and they soon agreed to Robin's barbaric plan. I could only watch as Sandy kicked down a branch from a nearby oak as Robin dragged my body from the depths of the ship. Nancy used my spare bandages to tie my wrists and ankles around the log. Robin and Sandy decided to carry the both ends of the stick, even if Robin wasn't the strongest of the three physically. Sandy went scouting ahead down the trail, disappearing with a baby Den Den to keep in touch. Robin went to gather supplies inside the ship, leaving Nancy with my body alone on the banks of the river. She sat silently, the silence broken only by the gurgling of the river and the occasional cry of some strange bird. "Thank you, Zoro," Nancy said quietly, barely audible enough for me to hear sitting next to her. "Just for always being there, ya know. I've known you the second longest than anyone in the crew, the first being Luffy, but I feel like we've always had like a sibling connection, if you know what I mean. You're always just there. Not always reliable when it comes to directions, but you kick some serious ass." I mulled over her words. The guy the first thought was lucky was probably the Luffy guy, red vest boy in the images I always got before my episodes. And my sense of direction was perfect, thank you very much. It was everything else that moved around. "I've been thinking," Nancy continued. "I'll decrease your debt by 10% if you come back." She was met by the silence of the forest as I did a tiny happy dance where I sat. Anything to decrease that damn debt. "Fine, 40%, Nancy complied with the silence. "Happy now, Nami Swan." Sandy's voice rang out through the trees, and the owner of said voice came racing from around the bend, a grin literally stretching from ear to ear. "It's incredible." Robin emerged from the ship, 3 backs thrown over her shoulder. "What is it, Sanji-san?" "There is a village," Sandy confirmed with delight, reaching for the pole from which hung my precious body. He took the front of the pole where my feet were bound and lifted it to his shoulder. "But the inhabitants are unlike anything you've seen before." Robin distributed the packs before placing the other end of the pole on her shoulder, with a few extra arms for added support. Still, a wince creased her mouth as my weight fell on her shoulders. My head lolled as it became suspended in the air, my wrist straining against the sloppy knot job holding them together. "Who are they?" she asked, as the party moved onward in the direction Sammy had just returned from. Sammy shook his head. "Not who. What? They're not human. Then what are they?" Nancy asked, her voice tinted with fear and curiosity. Sammy craned his neck to face the women, a light shining bright in his eye. "The stuff of legends.